his disciples to rejoice and leap for joy. Jesus declared that there were only two important things about religion: loving God with all our heart and our neighbor as ourselves. Any man who does that is religious regardless of whether he knows it. My father-in-law, Henry Price of Tulsa, Oklahoma, is a good example. He tries to live by the golden rule, and he is incapable of doing anything mean, selfish, or dishonest. However, he doesn't attend church and regards himself as an agnostic. Nonsense. What makes a man a Christian? I'll let John Bailey answer that. He was a distinguished professor who taught theology at the University of Edinburgh. He said, "What makes a man a Christian is neither his intellectual acceptance of certain ideas, nor his conformity to a certain rule, but his possession of a certain spirit, and his participation in a certain life." If that makes a man a Christian, then Henry Price is a noble one. William James, the father of modern psychology, wrote to his friend Professor Thomas Davidson, saying that as the years went by, he found himself less and less able to get along without God. Earlier in this book, I mentioned that when the judges tried to pick the best story on worry sent in by my students, they had so much difficulty in choosing between two outstanding stories that the prize money was split. Here's the second story that tied for first prize: the unforgettable experience of a woman who had to find out the hard way that she couldn't get along without God. I'm calling this woman Mary Cushman, although that's not her actual name. She has children and grandchildren who might be embarrassed to see her story in print, so I agreed to disguise her identity. However, the woman herself is real, very real. Here's how her story goes. During the Depression, she said, my husband's average salary was $18 a week. Many times we didn't even have that because he didn't get paid when he was ill, and that was often. He had a series of minor accidents. He also had mumps, scarlet fever, and repeated attacks of flu. We lost the little house that we'd built with our own hands. We owed $50 at the grocery store and had 5 children to feed. I took in washing and ironing from the neighbors and bought second-hand clothes from the Salvation Army store and made them over for my children to wear. I made myself ill with worry. One day, the grocer to whom we owed $50 accused my 11-year-old boy of stealing a couple of pencils. My son wept as he told me about it. I knew he was honest and sensitive, and I knew that he'd been disgraced and humiliated in front of other people. That was the straw that broke my back. I thought of all the misery we had endured, and I couldn't see any hope for the future. I must have become temporarily insane with worry, for I shut off my washing machine, took my little 5-year-old daughter up to the bedroom, and plugged up the windows and cracks with paper and rags. My little girl said to me, "Mommy, what are you doing?" And I answered, "There's a little draft in here." Then I turned on the gas heater we had in the bedroom and didn't light it. As I lay down on the bed with my daughter beside me, she said, "Mommy, this is funny. We just got up a little while ago." But I said, "Never mind, we'll take a little nap." Then I closed my eyes, listening to the gas escape from the heater. I shall never forget the smell of that gas. Suddenly, I thought I heard music. I listened. I'd forgotten to turn the radio off in the kitchen. It didn't matter now, but the music kept on, and presently I heard someone singing an old hymn. What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pains we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. As I listened to that hymn, I realized I'd made a tragic mistake. I'd tried to fight all my terrible battles alone. I'd not taken everything to God in prayer. I jumped up, turned off the gas, opened the door, and raised the windows. I wept and prayed all the rest of that day. Only I didn't pray for help. Instead, I poured out my soul in thanksgiving to God for all the blessings He had given me. 5 splendid children, all of them healthy and fine, strong in body and mind. I promised God that never again would I prove so ungrateful, and I have kept that promise. Even after we lost our home and had to move into a little country schoolhouse that we rented for $5 a month, I thanked God for that schoolhouse. I thanked Him for the fact that at least I had a roof to keep us warm and dry. I thanked God honestly that things were not worse, and I believe that He heard me. For in time things improved, no, not overnight, but as the Depression lightened, we made a little more money. I got a job as a hat check girl in a large country club and sold stockings as a sideline. To help put himself through college, one of my sons got a job on a farm, milked 13 cows morning and night. Today, my children are grown up and married. I have 3 fine grandchildren. And as I look back on that terrible day when I turned on the gas, I thank God over and over that I woke up in time. What joys I would have missed if I'd carried out that act. How many wonderful years I would have forfeited forever. Whenever I hear now of someone who wants to end his life, I feel like crying out, "Don't do it, don't." The blackest moments we live through can only last a little time, and then comes the future. On the average, someone commits suicide in these United States every 35 minutes. On the average, someone goes insane every 120 seconds. Most of these suicides, and probably many of the tragedies of insanity, could have been prevented if these people had only had the solace and peace that are found in religion and prayer. One of the most distinguished of psychiatrists, Dr. Carl Jung, says on page 264 of his book, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, "During the past 30 years, people from all the civilized countries of the earth have consulted me. I have treated many hundreds of patients. Among all my patients in the second half of life, that is to say, over 35, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. It is safe to say that every one of them fell ill because he had lost that which the living religions of every age have given to their followers, and none of them has been really healed who did not regain his religious outlook." That statement is so significant, I want to repeat it. Dr. Carl Jung said, "During the past 30 years, people from all the civilized countries of the earth have consulted me. I have treated many hundreds of patients. Among all my patients in the second half of life, that is to say, over 35, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. It is safe to say that every one of them fell ill because he had lost that which the living religions of every age have given to their followers, and none of them has been really healed who did not regain his religious outlook." William James said approximately the same thing. "Faith is one of the forces by which men live," he declared, "and the total absence of it means collapse." The late Mahatma Gandhi, the greatest Indian leader since Buddha, would have collapsed if he had not been inspired by the sustaining power of prayer. How do I know? Because Gandhi himself said so. "Without prayer," he wrote, "I should have been a lunatic long ago." Thousands of people could give similar testimony. My own father, well, as I've already said, my own father would have drowned himself if it had not been for my mother's prayers and faith. Probably thousands of the tortured souls who are now screaming in our insane asylums could have been saved if they had only turned to a higher power for help, instead of trying to fight life's battles alone. When we are harassed and reach the limit of our strength, many of us then turn in desperation to God. There are no atheists in foxholes. But why wait until we're desperate? Why not renew our strength every day? Why wait even till Sunday? For years, I've had the habit of dropping into empty churches on weekday afternoons. When I feel that I'm too rushed and hurried to spare a few minutes to think about spiritual things, I say to myself, "Wait a minute, Dale Carnegie, wait a minute. Why all the feverish hurry and rush, little man? You need to pause and acquire a little perspective." At such times, I frequently drop into the first church that I find open. Although I'm a Protestant, I frequently on weekday afternoons drop into St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue and remind myself that I'll be dead in another 30 years, but that the great spiritual truths that all churches teach are eternal. I close my eyes and pray. I find that doing this calms my nerves, rests my body, clarifies my perspective, and helps me revalue my values. May I recommend this practice to you. During the past 6 years that I've been writing this book, I've collected hundreds of examples and concrete cases of how men and women conquered fear and worry by prayer. I have in my filing cabinet folders bulging with case histories. Let's take as a typical example the story of a discouraged and disheartened book salesman, John R. Anthony of Houston, Texas. Here's his story as he told it to me. 22 years ago, I closed my private law office to become state representative of an American law book company. My specialty was selling a set of law books to lawyers, a set of books that were almost indispensable. I was ably and thoroughly trained for the job. I knew all the direct sales talks and the convincing answers to all possible objections. Before calling on a prospect, I familiarized myself with his rating as an attorney, the nature of his practice, his politics and hobbies. During my interview, I used that information with ample skill, yet something was wrong. I just couldn't get orders. I grew discouraged. As the days and weeks passed, I doubled and redoubled my efforts, but was still unable to close enough sales to pay my expenses. A sense of fear and dread grew within me. I became afraid to call on people. Before I could enter a prospect's office, that feeling of dread flared up so strong I'd pace up and down the hallway outside the door, or go out of the building and circle the block. Then, after losing much valuable time and feigning enough courage by sheer willpower to crash the office door, I feebly turned the doorknob with trembling hand, half hoping my prospect would not be in. My sales manager threatened to stop my advances if I didn't send in more orders. My wife at home pleaded with me for money to pay the grocery bill for herself and our 3 children. Worry seized me. Day by day I grew more desperate. I didn't know what to do. As I've already said, I'd closed my private law office at home and had given up my clients. Now I was broke. I didn't have the money to pay even my hotel bill. Neither did I have the money to buy a ticket back home, nor did I have the courage to return home a beaten man, even if I had the ticket. Finally, at the miserable end of another bad day, I trudged back to my hotel room. For the last time, I thought. So far as I was concerned, I was thoroughly beaten. Heartbroken, depressed, I didn't know which way to turn. I hardly cared whether I lived or died. I was sorry I had ever been born. I had nothing but a glass of hot milk that night for dinner. Even that was more than I could afford. I understood that night why desperate men raise a hotel window and jump. I might have done it myself if I'd had the courage. I began wondering what was the purpose of life. I didn't know. I couldn't figure it out. Since there was no one else to turn to, I turned to God. I began to pray. I implored the Almighty to give me light and understanding and guidance through the dark, dense wilderness of despair that had closed in about me. I asked God to help me get orders for my books and to give me money to feed my wife and children. After that prayer, I opened my eyes and saw a Gideon Bible that lay on the dresser in that lonely hotel room. I opened it and read those beautiful, immortal promises of Jesus that must have inspired countless generations of lonely, worried, and beaten men throughout the ages, a talk that Jesus gave to his disciples about how to keep from worrying. Take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body, what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body more than raiment? Behold the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them.